11,000 feet below the Pacific, a steel hull lies split in two, resting in darkness where the ocean floor drops away into nothing. For over 6 decades, the USS Stickleback waited in absolute silence off Oahu, not claimed by enemy fire, not lost to depth charges or torpedo strikes, but by something far more mundane and far more troubling. The crew walked away, every man pulled from the water alive. The submarine didn't, and when they finally found her again in 2020, the questions that sank with her in 1958 came back to the surface. What really happened 20 miles off Hawaii that afternoon in May? And why did the story feel incomplete from the very beginning? By May 1958, every diesel-electric submarine left over from World War II had become part of the Cold War's endless rehearsal, pushed through exercises designed to answer one question: were we ready for what might be coming? Stickleback, hull number SS-415, was a Balao-class workhorse built at Mare Island Navy Yard in Vallejo, California, in 1944. She was one of 120 Balao-class boats produced during the war, fast, deep-diving, and proven. She'd served the final year of the Pacific Campaign, running patrols out of Subic Bay in the Philippines, hunting Japanese convoys in the South China Sea. She survived the war without incident. When the Japanese surrendered in August 1945, Stickleback was decommissioned and sent to the Pacific Reserve Fleet, the Mothball Fleet, moored in long, silent rows at Mare Island, her batteries disconnected, her hatches sealed, her future uncertain. But the Cold War changed everything. When North Korea invaded the South in June 1950, the Navy scrambled to reactivate every submarine it could pull from storage. Stickleback was recommissioned in September 1951, refitted with updated sonar and radio equipment, and sent back to sea. By 1952, she was running deterrent patrols along the Korean coast. By 1956, she'd been reassigned stateside to Submarine Development Group 1, based out of Pearl Harbor. Submarine Development Group 1. The name sounds bureaucratic, boring even, but that unit's purpose was clear: test the tactical and operational limits of diesel-electric submarines against modern anti-submarine warfare. Push the boats, push the crews, find out what works. On paper, Stickleback's mission off Hawaii that spring was exactly what it appeared to be. She was scheduled to participate in a multi-day anti-submarine warfare exercise involving surface ships and submarines. The scenario was straightforward. Stickleback would play the target submarine. A group of U.S. Navy destroyers and destroyer escorts would hunt her. The objective: Stickleback would submerge, maneuver, evade detection, and give the surface ships realistic practice. The surface ships would track her with sonar and coordinate their search patterns. Training, controlled, routine, 20 miles offshore. A full crew aboard, running the same type of drills the Pacific Fleet had been executing for years. That was the plan. Stickleback's operational records listed standard equipment for the May 1958 exercise: diesel fuel, lubricating oil, freshwater, rations, charts of the Hawaiian operating area, and practice torpedoes. No live warheads, just training rounds. Standard loadout, approved and logged. But even routine exercises carry risk. And on May 29, 1958, something went wrong. So what happened that afternoon that turned a training drill into the loss of a submarine? The timeline of May 29, 1958 is preserved in fragments: official reports, deck logs, and the memories of men who were there. The USS Silverstein, a John C. Butler-class destroyer escort commissioned in 1944, was operating as one of the hunting ships in the exercise. She displaced 1,250 tons and carried sonar arrays designed for detecting submerged submarines. Late that afternoon, she was running search patterns in her designated area when sonar detected a submerged contact. What happened next unfolded quickly. Silverstein maneuvered to track the contact. Stickleback, operating submerged as part of the exercise, began procedures to surface. At some point in those critical minutes, the two vessels' paths converged. Silverstein's reinforced bow struck Stickleback's hull. The impact breached the submarine's pressure hull, and seawater began flooding the forward compartments. The crew responded immediately. Watertight doors were sealed. Damage control procedures were executed. The decision was made to abandon ship. Men scrambled topside and into the water. Silverstein launched rescue boats. A submarine rescue vessel nearby responded at full speed. The entire crew was recovered. Not a single man was lost. But Stickleback couldn't be saved. As flooding continued and the bow sank lower, the submarine's stern rose higher out of the water. Witnesses described the moment as surreal. the boat nearly vertical, suspended between sea and sky. Then she slipped beneath the surface and began her descent to the ocean floor, coming to rest at a depth of 1,800 fathoms, 10,800 feet. The official accident investigation concluded the incident resulted from a combination of factors during a complex training exercise. No negligence was found. No court-martial was convened. The summary was clean. A training accident. Lessons were documented. Procedures were reviewed. And for over 60 years, that's where the story ended. But here's what stayed unresolved. The exact sequence of events in those final minutes before impact remains unclear. Communication during complex multi-vessel exercises can be challenging, and the precise coordination between surface and submerged units in 1958 relied on technologies and procedures that had inherent limitations. What's documented is the outcome. A collision that shouldn't have happened did. The Navy called it an accident. The investigation confirmed it, and the crew's survival meant the story faded from public attention far faster than it might have otherwise. But a submarine still lay on the ocean floor, and the questions about how it got there never fully disappeared. When the Lost 52 project began searching for Stickleback in 2020, they were working with decades-old position estimates and a search area covering hundreds of square miles of deep ocean. The Lost 52 project, a privately funded initiative founded by philanthropist Paul Allen, had been systematically locating U.S. submarines lost during World War II. Stickleback, though a Cold War loss, fit within their expanded mission. Submarines gone, stories incomplete. The Navy's 1958 search efforts had been limited by the technology available at the time. They knew the approximate location, 20 miles off Oahu, in an area where the seafloor drops precipitously. But without the equipment to search at extreme depths, the wreck's precise location remained unknown. For over 6 decades, Stickleback was listed simply as lost. The Lost 52 project used modern side-scan sonar, covering the search area in methodical grid patterns. When they finally got a contact, a linear anomaly at extreme depth, they deployed a deep-rated remotely operated vehicle equipped with high-definition cameras. The wreck came into view gradually: sediment, shadows, then steel. The hull had broken into 2 main sections, confirming what the crew had witnessed in 1958: catastrophic flooding and structural failure during the descent. The images transmitted back showed a submarine that had been violently damaged but had not imploded. The pressure hull, despite the breach, had maintained enough integrity during the descent to preserve much of the boat's structure. It was recognizable, identifiable, unmistakably Stickleback. The discovery was documented and reported to the Naval History and Heritage Command. The Navy acknowledged the find and issued statements honoring the submarine's service and the professionalism of her crew. But what the wreck could tell us about those final minutes in May 1958 remained limited. Metal and sediment can confirm a collision occurred. They can show the damage. They can verify the account of the sinking. What they can't answer is why the collision happened in the first place. And that's the question that matters. Because training accidents don't just happen. They result from chains of events, decisions made, communications missed, assumptions that turned out to be wrong. The 1958 investigation identified contributing factors, but investigations in that era operated under different standards, with different technologies and different priorities. What we know is what survived in the official record. What we don't know is what never made it into that record, or what was considered too routine to document in detail. The wreck itself, now protected under the Sunken Military Craft Act, remains on the ocean floor. The act designates U.S. military wrecks as sovereign property and protects them from unauthorized disturbance. It's a preservation measure, a mark of respect. But it also means that whatever answers might lie in that wreckage will likely stay there. No large memorial was built for Stickleback. She's remembered in naval histories, in museum records, in the documentation maintained by the submarine force. But compared to vessels lost with crew aboard, her story occupies a quieter place in the historical record. The crew survived. That's what mattered most. That's what the Navy emphasized in 1958, and it's what shaped how the incident was remembered. But survival doesn't mean the story is complete. In the years since, some crew members have shared their recollections. One survivor, interviewed decades later, described the experience with the measured tone of someone who'd had a long time to process what happened: the collision, the flooding, the evacuation, the rescue. What comes through in these accounts isn't drama or conspiracy. It's the clarity of men who did their jobs under pressure and lived to talk about it. But they also acknowledged gaps, things that weren't clear in the moment, decisions made in seconds that might have gone differently. That's the nature of accidents. They're rarely the result of a single catastrophic failure. They're the confluence of small things, timing, communication, assumption, that align in exactly the wrong way. Over the years, families of the crew and naval researchers have sought additional records, deck logs, communication transcripts, the full investigative file. Some records exist, others are incomplete, or were never transferred to archives in a way that makes them accessible today. That's not unusual for incidents from that era. Record-keeping standards, archival practices, and document retention policies were different in the 1950s. What remains in the official record is enough to reconstruct the basic facts: a training exercise, a collision, a sinking, and a crew that survived. What's missing are the granular details that might explain precisely how two vessels on a coordinated exercise ended up on a collision course. The wreck sits in international waters at extreme depth, far beyond recreational diving limits. The Navy has not restricted access through classification, but the depth alone makes further exploration prohibitively expensive and technically challenging. The general location is known. Researchers found it, but returning to the site would require the same level of resources and expertise that the Lost 52 project deployed, and there's little operational reason to do so. The submarine is documented, the crew is accounted for, the incident is explained within the limits of what the evidence allows. What's left is the uncomfortable truth that sometimes accidents happen, and the full explanation dies with the moment. No cover-up, no conspiracy, just the fog that settles over any event when the people who were there can't fully reconstruct it, and the records that exist don't capture every detail. That's what Stickleback represents. Not a mystery, a gap, and gaps don't always get filled. Stickleback went down during a training exercise that was exactly what it appeared to be. No secret mission, no classified orders, just a routine ASW drill that ended in a collision no one intended and no one could prevent in time. The crew survived because they were trained, because rescue assets were nearby, and because they kept their heads while their boat flooded beneath them. The submarine sank because steel hulls don't survive breaches at depth, and once the flooding started, there was no saving her. The story feels incomplete because accidents always do. We want clear answers. Single points of failure, someone to blame or something to fix. Sometimes all you get is, it happened, and we don't know exactly why. Stickleback rests at 10 Thord 800 feet in cold and darkness, preserved by depth and law. The men who served aboard her went on to live full lives. The Navy learned what it could and moved forward, and the questions that went down with her in 1958 are still there, locked not in a classified file or a conspiracy, but in the simple, frustrating reality that some things are lost to time, not because anyone hid them, because no one captured them in the first place.